Hello, and welcome to I'm probably going to say this wrong because I don't know that I've ever actually said this word aloud before. Welcome to the Badinage Bacchanalia. The Badinage?
That sounds right, yeah?
Something like that. Well, let's see. I think Ed is here. He probably knows. Ed, welcome.
Hi guys. Sorry, I'm running tech problems as usual. Sorry about that.
How do you pronounce the term badinage or botanage? You're the one who used it first, so how do you pronounce it?
Oh, good question. I'm not using my good webcam. Oh, it's fine. I look fine. Anyways, sorry. Yeah, I should know that if I use a term. Well, there's some words I think that you read in books all your life, and then you use them in books, but you never actually say them in, like, when do you ever say that word in conversation? Like, you don't go to a party and then someone comes up to you and goes, how's the badinage been?
I don't know. I mentioned, like, hey, I want to have a YouTube stream, and you were like, oh, a Badinage Bacchanalia. It's like,
and you have a horrendous vest with your lover.
Speaking.
I like to say badinage because that sounds cool and kind of French, but it might
That's
just be
what I think Google is telling me.
Badinage.
Badinage.
Italian.
How do you pronounce it, Joe?
Oh, see, here's the thing. I looked it up in Google and it has the pronunciation, but I realized I don't remember how to read those because I learned this in elementary school, which was a different century. I think it's badinage.
Well,
it's a cool French way.
Lorraine is here. What's up, Lorraine? And she says she's never heard of a Badinage Bacchanalia. And it's okay, Lorraine, because it actually has nothing to do with bondage. We just want to make that clear. Because somebody...
all these people tune in and immediately tune out. I do not want to see these four guys tying each other up.
Well, so Ed, in his review of my book, said that something, used the term badinage, and I use that quote as like a like it's on the back of my book and stuff because I love the quote. And somebody read it and was like, is that like BSM or BDSM or something? I was like, no, it's witty dialogue.
That's why I used it, so I could get some more bigger readership to your book.
What does Bacchanalia mean? Never mind badinage. What does Bacchanalia mean? That's a whole other word.
Just like a crazy party, bruh.
Okay. On a Monday evening.
It's from...
Well, no, I won't even make that joke.
It's from the ancient Greeks. Dionysus. Pronunciation is failing me today. The Greek god of wine, anyway. He used to have these amazing parties, and where they just, had a lot of wine, did a lot of stuff that that we probably can't talk about, and they were the Bacchanalias, the wine parties. So I think that's where it comes from.
Shreds, typical stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's the parties where they just like dismembered each other, wasn't it?
Yeah. Ariana, I do not have my hat. I am not at home. I am at a lakeside cabin because it is spring break. And so, no, I do not have the hat. I'm sorry.
Back a hat? That's lame.
Spring break.
The Shire Hobbit is here. He says something that I'm not going to be able to say very well aloud.
Dave, are you in Miami for spring break with all the
Yes.
kids?
The funny thing about it is that there is a Miami, Oklahoma. It is just pronounced Miami, Oklahoma, even though it is spelled the same way because people in Oklahoma are stupid. But also I love them. But no, I'm at a lake in Oklahoma. Shush it, Ariana. All right. The first thing we are going to do here, now that we have frackled about Bacchus, we are going to introduce our lovely guests here. So I'm Dave. You guys have probably seen me before if you're watching this because this is my YouTube channel. Unless you came along to watch one of these fine gentlemen here and you're like,
we're all here for
Ed talking. But I want to introduce my three guests here. two of whom have been on this channel before, and one who's a first timer. So we're gonna start off with this first timer, Joe JCM Berne. Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm under a lot of pressure here. I'm Joe Berne. I'm the writer of author of here we go. Wistful Ascending and the rest of the Hybrid Helix. I'm in the grind right now, drafting book 7, which is killing me, and because for various reasons, but that's typical author story. And Partial Function, which is my fantasy novel that I wrote in an attempt to win Spiffbo, which failed miserably. And I think I'm funny, but other people may disagree. I guess those are my credentials. People have my books humorous, so, but they're not comedies. We'll get into that.
We are going to be talking about comedy or the lack thereof here today. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Next, we have Sean O'Boyle, who, congratulations, you're a father now, I know, and really proud of you.
I mean, yes, I'm Spricket, but I'm not like in any official capacity. Yeah, no, not to my knowledge. But yes, no. Hi, I'm Sean, and I'm the author of The Ballad of Spricket the Bard and Company. It's a fantasy comedy adventure, JSim. I do write comedies. And it's a fun little book. And I also have another book coming out over the summer. It's a novella set in the same world called Checks, Balances, and Proper Procedure and Monster Hunting, which actually I'll be revealing the cover of that next week. And it's a fun little cover, so look forward to that one.
I read the beta draft. It was really good. Ed, I think you edited it, right?
I line edited it and proofread it. Yeah, I can't take any claim for the story. It's been really funny. So people in for a real treat there. It's I mean, the last book was funny. I'm sure we've all read The Ballad of Spricket the Bard and Company, but this is like the next level in terms of humor. At least it's just genuinely hilarious. So people should watch out for that.
Whew, there we go. Okay, I didn't waste my life. I didn't waste my time. Okay, great.
You are funny.
Looks like EL is here because Ariana dragged her along. Got
there's so many
Spricket.
people.
Oh, congrats on the baby. The baby is Spricket, Ariana.
There's no baby.
There is no
I am not
human
having
baby.
a child.
Mazel tov!
If you look Sean's label here, it says Spricket's father.
Spricket's father. Yeah, no. There's no child being. I'm getting married this year, which is happens like having a baby all on its own. So,
No, it's really not.
It's
really not. I've had 4. It's really different.
Okay.
Way easier to get married.
Okay. Doesn't feel that way, but I take your word for it.
No, yeah, trust me. I've been married a couple times, had 4 kids. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right.
I can do the comparison test.
True.
I'm not saying getting married successfully is easy. Getting married is easy.
So that's the reason why Rohan has a different woman in every single book of Hybrid Helix.
Not true. Well, okay. The way I ended the first book, I had to have a different one in book 2, and then he gets back with the first one later on.
Okay, I need to read more of it.
You should.
Yeah, I'm just a lot faster with an audiobook. Speaking of audiobooks, a book that I read on audiobook was by Ed. Ed, tell us about yourself.
Did you listen to the audiobook?
I did.
She's great. Shakira, who reads it. Yeah, she makes my average book that actually sound good. She's amazing. I love it. I'm Ed. I don't normally look like a pale ghost. I was in a rush, so I'm using my laptop webcam, not my proper webcam. So I'm just looking at myself thinking, my God, I look pale.
Same.
Anyway, I'm Ed Crocker. I am writing a fantasy trilogy. The first one came out, epic fantasy trilogy. The first one came out in January in America. Not Britain, sadly, in America, called Lightfall. It's an epic fantasy trilogy with vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers, but no humans, as I like to say, relentlessly, and it's no longer funny. Yeah, and I'm an editor by trade. I have the privilege of editing books like Sean's. Yeah, that's me really. I review stuff. I review books as well for places.
All right.
And that is me. Oh, can I also say this is the most popular like live thing I've ever seen. About 8 names have popped up. Like normally when you do this stuff, you have like 3 or 4 like really nice people, and I've seen about 10 names pop up. This is crazy. Are you like really popular, Dave? What's going on?
I am
I
a
don't know.
really big deal. And it's absolutely not because Ariana has been getting together all the people to show up for this stream.
Thanks, Ariana.
But Audrey wants to be you when she grows up. Ed, Audrey is my
What does that mean?
like my beta reader extraordinaire who is working to become a developmental editor and a line editor. And she is the absolute best beta reader. Even if people thought my first book sucked, it wouldn't have sucked as little without her. She is amazing. So
Well, you don't want to be like me in all respects when you grow up, but
it's true. Oh, yeah, we're not gonna let Ariana ask any questions. Last time she asked a question about if you rather would have sausage fingers or mayonnaise sweat. So we will not be asking Ariana any questions. Anyway, I am Dave. I wrote this book. It is called
Mayonnaise sweat.
And it is a snarky fantasy adventure. I also think I am hilarious, but I would not classify it as like a comedy, but more of a book that is, I refer to as like a witty fantasy. And on Amazon, I did put it in the humorous fantasy category, but I really struggled with it for a while because to me, while the characters are funny, like in the like their interactions with each other, it's not like a book where all of the things that happen are funny. But for Amazon categorizing, that's what it came up with. So I'm actually going to somewhat agree with Joe probably here in a little bit when we talk about some of this stuff. But yes, that is my book. I've got another novella coming out here in about 2 months, and I'm working through some beta feedback on that right now and revising things and doing all of that. And yeah, we are going to talk today about writing witty dialogue, writing funny books, and why you should probably read more witty/funny books. So the first question today is kind of going to go to everybody, and we'll kind of give you a chance to talk about it and then just sort of go off each other here. So for all of you, do you tell people that your books are funny?
Yeah.
Yes.
So why do you tell people this, Sean?
So,
you go first, Joe.
So the thing is, I write superhero stories about man punching spaceships is usually how. And the problem is, it's very common people to think it's going to be a comedy when they hear the short synopsis. Right. My second book is about giant sharks invading the earth. People are like, oh, that's hilarious. And I'm like, it's really not. Like, there's nothing about the sharks that's supposed to be funny. No one who reads the book thinks they're funny. They're not funny, right? It's not a comedy. And to me, what a comedy means is a comedy is where the story itself, the storyline, the plot is funny, or it's absurd, or it's humorous in some way. Whereas if you just have people saying funny things in a serious situation, that's humorous, but it's not a comedy. The plot's not comedic. So I'm trying to avoid that assumption that my plot's going to be comedic because the synopsis tends to sound absurd. And the whole thing I'm trying to do is play the absurd premise straight, but also have humorous elements in the dialogue, or basically. But the plot is meant to be played straight, and that's the kind of like my thing. I don't mean only my thing. I mean, but that's my thing. Other people do it too, And if I sold it as a comedy, I get the wrong impression. I mean, it's trying to tell a serious story and you should laugh at stuff that happens because people say funny things that I think are funny, but it's not a comedy. So that's but I wouldn't say no one should pitch their stuff as a comedy, right? Like that's a different question, but I never do. And I always get a little annoyed's too strong a word, right? But I'm always a little thrown off when people review the book and they're like, "Oh, it was hilarious. You'll laugh throughout." And that's all they say. And I'm like, that's great. Thank you. Like that's so sweet. I appreciate that. But please don't like leave it at that because that's not what I was going for. I hope you got more out of it than it just made you laugh. So that's my thing.
You do have space bears in your books, and they have Russian accents in the audio, and it's amazing.
Yeah. It's in the text, actually. I spent a lot of time learning how to write sentences that you immediately go into bad Russian accent when you read them. But that worked out. It does. It sounds like a comedy, but most people, I don't know. That's fine.
I'd call it like if it were a movie, it would be like a dramedy or whatever, where it's kind of like it is a dramatic story with humorous moments.
Yeah. I'll buy that.
And I think and here, I mean, that's actually talking about a different book. That's talking about Sean's, but the same thing of like, I feel like, and we're going to talk, we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. So that's the next question. So we're not going to get into that yet, but Ed, why don't you tell people that your book is funny?
Well, unless you're doing like an out and out comedy, like Sean can correctly say that his is funny because it's kind of pitched as a comedy fantasy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, if it's not. But when you're meant to be writing a serious, I mean, my book's not very serious at all. But when you're meant to be writing a serious epic fantasy, you can't tell people it's funny because that's almost more like you're describing it rather than categorizing it. And as soon as you tell someone that you're funny, kind of by definition, you're not, right? that's genuinely the way it goes. You go, oh yeah, great, you got to read my book. There's some hilarious quips in there. There's some really funny scenes. Like, by definition, you're probably not funny. I tend to find, that's just my opinion. So I have to sort of suggest through other ways that I think it's funny. And one of the ways I do that is that I say how important I think humor is in fantasy and books, and that's my way of saying that's all I care about, right? So mine's a very serious topic, very serious themes. I base it off Buffy, right? Buffy the Vampire Slayer is kind of my go-to in terms of humor, in terms of drama. Like everything I do, I'm trying to emulate Buffy the Vampire Slayer. That's essentially my gig, right? So Joe's nodding. Yeah. So Buffy the Vampire Slayer, slightly stupid if you think about it, but as long as you don't think about it too much, very serious things happen, very sad things happen. But the whole point is the dialogue is just quip, zing, zing, zing. Everyone's zinging. Everyone's kind of doing a bit of comedy, right, within that thing. And mine's not. I wish I made it a bit more funny actually, but mine's not quite like that. But I want to have the dialogue like that, and I want to have exactly. Ed's motto is, "What would Buffy do?" Or Xander, or Spike. Actually, what would Spike do?
Don't start what would Joss Whedon do to get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. So I guess my thing is like humor's really important to me. I really want my books to be funny. I really hope they're funny, but I can't say that outright to people that I think I'm funny. So I tread a very difficult line, which is not helped by my constant neuroses that maybe I'm not funny.
I just have lots of good friends. Like there's a guy named Bill Adams who is just a really nice, kind person who he's very sweet and he says things like, "Dave, you're not funny." And I know what he means is, "Dave, you're hilarious. Keep writing those books." And I do it. So
Corden is very funny. Your character Corden is absolutely hilarious, I have to say.
I mean, and I would say kind of the same thing as what you're saying with like, I write about situations that are not funny with funny characters. So like the characters have that back and forth that I love. Like I studied film in college, and I studied like the 1930s and 40s screwball comedies where the characters are just like back and forth banter the entire time, and I love those. Those are some of my favorite movies. And like I also love a good Regency England style, like where they're back and forth with kind of cutting wit. And so like that's my kind of humor that I have in here, whereas like the events, there's like kids getting kidnapped and people dying, and like, you know, it's not exactly like happy stuff happening, but the characters have a lot of zingers back and forth. I'm scared now. I don't remember what university script this is. But I did write some screenplays in college. They were like mafia mobster things. They were like, "Hey, what you doing?" That whole kind of thing. So
sounds amazing.
I don't know if they were any good, but they definitely were mobster comedies of sorts.
Let's do a live reading. I'll be one of the characters. We'll do it right here and now.
The full length one that I wrote
John,
was about a guy who was like he was a private dick taking down the mafia, but they had like their entire mafia thing was the front was like an aquarium. So we had to like go undercover as this nerdy fish enthusiast. It was, I mean, there was a lot of just like characters bantering, and I have no idea if the plot really went along.
My grandparents lived next door to a mafia hitman. True story.
Fish?
Oh, wow.
He liked chickens. He would throw chickens over the fence to them. I think he just got paid off in chickens on occasion. This was a long, I'm old, so this is an old story. But and I never met the guy because he was always in jail because he was a mafia hitman. That's kind of what happened. But that was my upbringing.
Paid off in chickens. What is this, Of Mice and Men or something? What's going on?
I mean, I'm sure like lots of industries in New York City are sort of controlled by the mob, right? So I'm sure the slaughterhouses were at the time. I don't think there are slaughterhouses in Brooklyn anymore. The city's changed a lot since those days, but he would just go and like do his rounds, and they'd give him some bunch of chickens, dead chickens, and he would toss a couple over for my grandfather, who everyone liked, over the fence, and my grandmother would have to pluck the chickens and cook them and everything. And never met the guy, but the most New York story it is. It's a very New York story from that end, So my dad would tell me not to sit on people's cars. The mob guys would have someone come and break your legs if you sat on their cars. So we were very careful about that sort of thing.
See, I lived in New York, in Manhattan, from 2007 to 2009.
Really?
I lived in Stuyvesant Town.
I went to Stuyvesant High School, which was next to Stuytown when I went there. It was on.
I know they moved it down to.
It was on 1st and 15th. Yeah. We used to drink beer in Stuytown. We used to go at night and we drink beer on the vents, the vents for the heating system. This could be warm spot. You get a warm air blown up, and so you could stay warm in the winter. And sorry, go ahead.
I mean, it was very like, New York by that point was pretty, what's the term?
Gentrified.
Different than it probably was earlier on. Like I've watched those movies from the 70s and 80s, The French Connection, etc.
I grew up in the Warriors, New York. You didn't live in Warriors, New York.
Did Dave grow up in Sex and the City, New York? Basically, is what you're saying. Like he was having brunch with the girls and worrying about Mr. Big.
Yes. I was there getting a master's of fine arts in fiction writing, living the dream. Sometimes I had enough money to buy like cheese and rice to be able to eat that week.
You wish you were paid in chickens.
Yes, I wish someone was throwing me chickens.
Should have hung out with my grandparents.
So we are going to, the next question is the one I started trying to talk about already, and I think Joe already sort of started trying to talk about it already.
Sorry.
But when we're talking about writing witty dialogue, writing witty characters and funny stories, why is seriousness and high stakes and things like that. Why is that so important in making things funny?
Contrast. That's the easy answer, right? You build tension and you release it with a joke. That is an easy way to get a harder laugh than you would otherwise get. Not the only way, right? But it is an easy way.
They, as well as contrast, they sort of go together as well, because humor is like a almost biological way to deal with tragedy, and so it almost kind of comes with tragedy and comes with drama. I mean, that's where gallows humor comes from, right? When my granddad died, I did a speech for him, and the first three things I said were just puns on the fact he was lying next to me dead. I was doing death puns, and everyone was a bit shocked. People didn't know me, but humor for me humor comes in the most tragic of situations. And so when characters are faced with awful things happening to them, it seems to me the most natural thing in the world that they would resort to humor as a coping strategy as the world falls down around them. It's like you're sat in a prison cell, the king's about to execute you the next day. Everything's going awful. Some grimdark books would just be like, let's go down on the grimdark, and that's fair enough. Others will be like, this is the time when you crack a joke, because these are people dealing with the worst possible thing about to happen to them. And so their brain is like, well, how do we deal with this? We make a joke.
Yeah, I think as well as that, humor, it sort of humanizes your characters a bit more, makes them a bit more believable. And secondly, I think as well, humor can be a great way to actually ramp up tension in some ways. If you've got people you could have like friends cracking jokes, that's all good and well, but having like characters like bickering in a really funny way in a scenario where they shouldn't be bickering, that can drive the tension, because on one hand you're laughing, all these Spricket and the gang, they're up to their old tricks bickering away, but also there's this really serious thing that's in the background, or someone's going to catch them or something like that. And so you got that kind of dichotomy between kind of the joyful and the playfulness of the dialogue, but also like knowing that it's going to sort of build to like a crescendo that's going to end in something like dramatic. So yeah.
One thing that I would say, based on, I mean, I have read something by all of you, and Lamia Bayan, if she were here, would be criticizing me right now, because she says that I'm always bragging about how I've read everybody's books. But so I've read everything by all of you, and like Sean and Spricket the Bard, like it's like, oh, this is a really fun, fast-paced comedy, and it's like, oh my god, the emotional weight of Spricket's past has hit me, and I just want to cry, but also this is still really funny. And I feel like that, like, the emotional weight that like hits you about, maybe it's like 20% in or something like that, and really like transforms a funny story into like an amazing, like, this is like a well-rounded masterpiece. And because it's one of the best indie books that I've read, and I think I probably told you something like that before. Honestly, all three of you are here because, well, Ed, sorry, you haven't written any good indie books. Joe and Ed, both of you have two of the best indie books that I've read. Ed's book was trad published, so that's why he doesn't count over there.
I'm an imposter.
But and I think Vivian says it right here, like, it's a very deep story. Grief, like deflecting the grief through witty banter. And I think my characters kind of do things the same way, where like, and I feel like that's who I am in general as a person. Like, when things are bad, I cope with the bad situations through comedy, humor, self-deprecating humor. I think, Joe, I'm pretty sure that's what you do as well. And I think, it's kind of what Rohan does in that. And then Ed, all of your characters have that same vibe, like thinking of Sam and like her background in Lightfall, which is like absolutely the most tragic background I think you can get. and then it's like
everyone's dead.
yeah, they're all
Whole
dead.
family's dead.
And
Mom
it's like,
dead,
but
dad
then you
dead,
know,
sister dead.
but then like she still has this sort of positive, not positive outlook about the society, but maybe about herself. And like she has wit. All the characters around here have this wit that just kind of flows off the page. And it's like, for me, I feel like whenever the situations are really serious, but and there's this emotional weight and everything like that, but then the characters are funny, you've got this situation where it just like you're invested in the seriousness, but then you are just like you fall in love with the funny characters, and it just like takes those books so far up above. One of my biggest problems sometimes with epic fantasy is there are a lot of epic fantasies that are like the gods of ruling the world, one man will fight gods, and it's like, hello brother, we shall go and fight the gods, are you with me? Aye brother. And like it's the entire thing is like, oh,
tell me
my
more,
God.
Dave. I want more of this riveting story. What happens next?
It's just like there's a lot of them that are very much the same, where it's like everything is serious, the characters, it's all like it's epic fantasy, and I need more to like give the characters, because like people are often funny, or they at least try to be. They may not always be funny, but like people are not always walking around. And like I do some like beta reading and things like that, and I'll sometimes read a book where the characters are just like, hello brother, I shall now tell you everything I have thought over the past 6 weeks. And it's like people would actually be like, they don't talk that way.
Oh, the thing is that you don't have to do this, but a way to make your book enjoyable to readers is to populate it with characters that they would like to hang out with on a weekend, right? That isn't, you don't have to do that, but it is a good way to like suck readers in. Like, this is like my family I wish I had. That whole found family thing, people love that dynamic. And you found family only works if they're like charismatic. They seem like they'd be fun to be in that family. You would project yourself into that. And humor is a really nice way to do that. Right? This is why I think like Thomas Covenant would be a hard sell today, right? You read Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, it's like, I wouldn't want to hang out with that guy. He sucks, and he sucks for a good reason. I don't know if you read Thomas Covenant. He's like, okay, I'm sorry. It's an epic fantasy from the 80s, right? One of the big ones, Stephen Donaldson. But like, it's a classic, grim. He's not a good guy. He's tormented. It's like, it's no fun to be around. You can pull it off. Those books sold, but people often like, that's the thing about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It seems like, the Scooby Gang is in the room trying to figure out like how to kill the vampire of the week. Yeah, you'd enjoy I'd like to be in that room hanging. I wouldn't want to be, eaten by a vampire, but other than that, hanging out with these guys seems like it'd be a good time. Even Giles is kind of funny and seem nice, right? So it's a good way to suck people in to the story.
I would agree with that. I think it's definitely, I feel like if people fall in love with your characters, it's so much easier for them to stay for the ride and read. One of my biggest problems sometimes with like really grim dark books is that just like all the characters are kind of reprehensible. They're all really just like, you're just like, you hate them all. And it's kind of like, I don't want to spend time with any of these people.
But when you read a book, you are, right? You're forced to. And again, people can certainly, writers can have ways to work around it. So you spend time with people you wouldn't ever like, and you can still enjoy the book, but it's hard. Yes,
it takes a very specific craft to do the whole like characters you would like to hang out with, but you find to be compelling characters. Like take the First Law trilogy, for example. I don't want to be in the same town as Galacta, but that guy is possibly one of my favorite characters in fantasy I've read in the last year, or anywhere near. What's the little like annoying prince guy called again? Oh God! Anyway, he's annoying, but he's also a good character. Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah, no, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
I actually liked him, and I feel like it's because I love a character who's kind of a self-obsessed prat, but maybe has a decent heart underneath it all. And I feel like that is him.
I mean, Sean, I was about to say Abercrombie because Sean's completely correct. Like you were saying the problem about Grimdark, and that's why my favorite Grimdark authors are the ones that, like Abercrombie, that have these characters who not a single one would you ever want to have as a friend, with a couple of exceptions maybe. But you're obsessed with reading about them because they've got that wit about them. You know, since 3 out of the 4 people here are indie authors, I'll shout out Holly Tinsley, who is a grimdark author, and her books are like really dark. Obviously grimdark, but they're hilarious. Just like her characters, just constantly coming out with quips, and so like I just wanna be around these characters, not necessarily really, but like I'd love to sort of observe them for a while.
Another indie author who writes grimdark, and was recently referred to as
H.L. Tinsley, sorry, not Holly. Sorry, shouldn't say authors' first names if it's not their pen name. Sorry. Carry on.
So I'm gonna call him by his first name anyway because that's what I do. But ZB
She
Steele,
won't mind.
also known as ZB Baby, Zach, whatever you want to call him. He's like 12 years old, but he is like, I think he's been called like a rising star of grimdark. And he's his novella came out pretty recently, called An Inkling of Flame, and it's been doing really well with reviewers. And then he has a novel coming out here soon. But he writes grimdark, but it's like his first book was very Tarantino-ish. I don't think his later ones are quite like that, but all of his characters are bantery and they've got wit, but the events that are happening are very grim and like everyone's dying and stuff. But that's an example of like, it's grimdark, but it's got the funny bits in it that make you like, okay, I'm not just reading about this miserable situation that makes me want to cry. Like there's also some moments of levity mixed in. All right. So our next question here, this is one that is near and dear to my heart. What is your philosophy of writing dialogue?
God, these questions, man. This is like how do you write funny stories? And I'm being asked about philosophy and writing dialogue. Jesus Christ. Okay.
At least the people watching know that we weren't given these in advance because we were like,
yeah.
I don't know.
I think with me, my philosophy in dialogue is it has to be a rhythm to it. I get really anxious when I'm writing dialogue, and I'm like it isn't clicking. I'm info dumping. This character wouldn't say it this way. I have to almost read the dialogue like I'm reading. I don't know, in a way I'm reading like a poem. Like for example, Torg will speak like this. Bricket should reply like that. This statement should be followed by that statement. Oh, that he said that thing. Therefore, this character should undercut what he said by saying this thing. I think that ebb and flow, having that rhythm to the dialogue, so that essentially your reader is casting their eye down it, and the aim for me is that they're so engrossed in the dialogue they kind of forget they're reading a book, and it all just sort of comes to life for them because I've been able to kind of just make that dialogue leap off the page, and you can almost hopefully attribute what one character says to a friend, and so just trying to just keep it as real as I can without becoming anachronistic to the time period my book is set in, while also ensuring that it flows like water, basically. Again, it's a hard thing to describe, but it's like this je ne sais quoi that I have about writing dialogue. So that's my answer. So,
Yeah,
And I know you
sort
can
of
talk
have-
about this because I'm pretty sure you did like an hour and a half long video about writing dialogue that I watched. So
Yeah, that was a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
for SFF addicts, yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
that was mainly mostly
a good one.
bluster, and I can't remember what I said for that. I should pull that out of my head and say it now. Yeah, I'm obsessed with dialogue. I'm a bit of a weirdo in that you know, like fancy people and SFF people, they're like, "What's your thing? Is it world building? Is it plot? Is it character?" I'm like, "No, it's dialogue." And prose to some extent, but I just love dialogue so much. Like if a book's got good dialogue and some of the other things aren't working, I'll give it more of a try. And if a book's good but the dialogue's really flat, I'll probably DNF it. That's not an answer. So sorry, I get too enthusiastic when I start talking about dialogue. So I have two things on my shoulder when I'm writing dialogue. I have two things: a devil and an angel. Right. So the devil is telling me that you want to try and copy Aaron Sorkin. You know, the guy who wrote The West Wing, who's done all those kind of witty politics films. So that kind of dialogue is it's not realist dialogue, it's not kitchen sink, it's not Harold Pinter realist dialogue. It's just like bam, 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 fast talking, people walking down corridors. It's got the flow, it's got the wit, it's beautiful, it's amazing to watch. You know, if you watch The West Wing, the dialogue is just wow, it's just like coming at you 100 miles an hour, and it's so clever and it's so fast and it's just boom, boom, boom. And I want to write that all the time, but you can't really do that in books as much. So the angel on my shoulder is telling me that you want to write realistic, like Sean was saying, you want to write realistic dialogue. You want to write the kind of dialogue that people would actually say if they were there. And the problem with humor, which you've been talking about, is that people don't, unless they're those kind of narcissists who come into a party with the quips ready, people aren't normally as funny as these like Buffy or West Wing in real life. You know, they might have one great quip every conversation, but they're not script writing funny. They're just kind of naturally funny and conversationally funny. So my constant philosophy of dialogue is I want to get a little bit of the Aaron Sorkin. I want to get a little bit of that flow, that kind of like zing, that kind of the quips coming in. But I also want to make it feel like these are still people, so that when the sad bits come, that when the heartbreaking kind of end of chapter moments come, it feels natural and it feels like you're watching a stage play. Now I've not got that right so far, as many reviewers will tell you of my debut. But
Haters,
but that's
detractors, all of them.
yeah, it's a Marmite book. But ultimately, in a few years' time, like that's where I'd love to get my dialogue at. That kind of it's like Aaron Sorkin, but it's like realistic as well. That's my ultimate philosophy, which might take me a while to get to.
right.
My thing is to well, dialogue in general, and everyone knows this, is to make sure that characters sound distinct, right? So they don't. What one characters, if you could trade the characters who speak a line, with rare exceptions, right? Kind of someone else speak the line, it would still sound okay. You've done something wrong, right? It should be unique to the character. The same thing for your jokes, right? Different characters are going to make different kinds of jokes, and so you really, if you want to write a funny book, you've got to have like 6 different senses of humor going. I don't know if it's 6, but it's more than one, and play that off of different, the different characters. So I totally agree that it is more like a poem, and it is more. I think writing funny is harder than writing straight, right? Like I can just tell a straightforward. I mean, this is why, and I'm going to crap on Brandon Sanderson, which I really don't mean to do, but like telling a straightforward like story with like simple prose and like straightforward telling and straightforward dialogue. That's how he can crank out 10,000 words a day, because that's how he's writing in that way. But if you're trying to write like really stellar prose or like really snappy, sharp dialogue or write funny, that requires a certain level of inspiration. And you can't just sit there and crank out inspiration to the tune of 10,000 words a day after day. And it doesn't work like that. You can try. I mean, I've had a 10,000 word day, I think, but like once, but you can't just churn it out like that. So you've got to have some inspiration, which just takes some time, some staring at the keyboard time. Staring at the screen. You shouldn't be staring at the keyboard. Stare at the screen. So that's my that make the characters sound different and have them tell different jokes.
I think one of the big things that I think, and so dialogue's my favorite thing to write. I love writing dialogue. A lot of times when I am drafting, I write the dialogue. Like I'm just like, I get in the zone and I write like 4 pages of dialogue. And then I have to like go back and sort of add in some of the other things to where it's not just, but like I also did kind of get my start. I wrote plays in like high school and in college. I was writing plays, and like I had at one point wanted to be a playwright. And then I kind of went with writing fiction instead. But dialogue's always been my favorite thing, and the thing that I just like, it's what I enjoy writing the most. But I feel like the big thing that you have to do is that you have to kind of make your characters sound like people and not characters, because characters often are just going to impart the information across that is needed to move the story along. Whereas people, when they talk, do not just impart the information across that is needed for the story to move forward. There's a lot of like, if there's, you know, someone needs to say, well, all they have to do is tell them this one thing and that moves it to the next scene, right? It's like, no, they're going to tell them 3 other things first, or like try to talk their way out of it before then finally coming back to it. Or there's just a lot of people are not, first, they're not going to monologue unless they're me right now on this stream. But they're not gonna, they often don't monologue unless it's like a situation like this where it's like, we're here to be talking heads about this topic. But like if 2 people are sitting there having a conversation, most of the time one person's not going to monologue for 2 pages. They're also probably not going to tell their entire life story to someone they just met. Maybe not even like, and even if they do, they're probably going to leave out a lot of stuff. So it's kind of like whenever you're writing dialogue, I feel like the main thing to do is just like try to make your characters sound like people and not like characters. And I know that might sound weird if you're like, but they are characters. But you want them to be people. You want your readers to connect with them as people, assuming they're people and not space bears or whatever. But space bears are people too. And just kind of like connect with them and feel like, once again, I would hang out with this person. I'd go get a pint with them. I'd go get a rainbow colored Guinness on St. Patrick's Day with them.
I'm leaving the stream. I'm out of here. Goodbye. Good night. Goodbye forever. Right, sorry, Joe. I think Joe raised a really interesting point there about like the whole inspiration point of it. Because oftentimes I'll write like half a chapter of Spricket or even 1,000 words of Spricket of like really like good tight dialogue or really a real tight like little scene that I'm really proud of, and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted after like an hour writing because just like the mental faculties to spin that tale, and I might not be able to write for another day or 2 because I've got other things going on in my life, and then I come back to it. And I think, and again, not to disparage Brandon Sanderson, but I do have a bugbear with some of his writing, particularly in Wind and Truth. Where
he's not watching.
I felt like just some of the jokes in his dialogue was super like low hanging fruit. Like this guy was told by his editor, "You got to pepper some jokes in there, Brandon," and he went for like MCU tier quips and fart jokes, and there was no. I was annoyed by these jokes because there was no inspiration or thought put into them.
I don't think any editor was involved in that.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I don't know why I wrote the word that way, but yeah, I do think because you can read when it's authentic and you know when it's phony. I think your readers will pick up on it when you're forcing it, and when you're forcing it, it can really pull your book down.
And I'll say this to people who are writing, like a lot of that inspiration when you're getting it, you can't always control it, and it can be. I'm just going to say this as like a general, like a public service announcement. It can be affected by outside, non-writing related issues. So if you are feeling very stressed about, for example, a political upheaval that you find personally offensive that is going on in your country, or regardless of which side of the thing you're on, that can make it really hard to write. Like sometimes that can dry up the well. things in your life. It could be personal things, right? You can have like someone is sick, and you have a rough few months at work. I'm going through all that right now. So, just speaking from personal experience, just had a rough couple months at work, and like everything's harder. I don't have an answer for that. Wish I did.
I think just sort of pick up, on what you sort of both saying. But what Sean was saying about how sometimes you just can't write funny dialogue because it's just like your brain's raw. I think a lot of authors, because people are obviously different, obviously, it's basic statement. So some people aren't naturally funny in a way that they can write funny. So I think some authors have a choice to make, which is, do I try and put in some funny stuff because I feel like this should be funnier, or I think some authors basically research how to be funny. Like I'm really bad at, and obviously I'd never name any names, but I'm really bad at like descriptions of things like clothes and stuff. I have to go away and research like what the clothes are exactly, and I'm constantly terrified. Like, is that a jerkin? Is that a doublet? Whatever. And it's just like, oh, it's like my brain is I shouldn't say stuff I've not been diagnosed with, but I suspect I'm like dyspraxic, which is when you're just sort of like, if I see someone doing something, I can't just copy it. I have to have them come over and get them to show it to me. And I get that in my writing, so I can't like understand how things work or put together, like clothes and buildings. I have to go off and research it over and over again. It's almost like I'm paraphrasing it. I think a lot of people are like that with humor. I think they're kind of artificially maybe going to people's conversations and thinking, okay, that's good. I can take that from that conversation with friends and they can put it in. And whereas others will just kind of sit there and just naturally it will just kind of come out like a sort of like just a fountain. And so I think if I was giving advice, which I wouldn't be because I'm just a debut author, I would say to authors like, if it's really struggling to like be funny and put that in, just make it less funny. That's fine, because I think sometimes artificial humor is sort of like kind of Sean was saying about an author I won't keep ragging on. Sometimes artificial humor, I think, comes across worse than just having less humor, even though I like humor. Does that make sense?
You don't want to be the friend at the party dragging the whole thing down with your shit jokes, basically. So just apply that to your writing. That's my sage advice to you there.
Yeah.
I think that's where people run into trouble, right? Take this hypothetical person whose life was basically they spent a lot of time like by themselves, maybe doing something like writing, and then they hang out with their kids a bunch, and then they kind of go to sleep, and that's their life cycle. They get sort of used to what they think is. They say, "How do you know what's funny?" You say something, and a bunch of people in front of you laugh, right? And if you're hanging out with a bunch of adults at a bar, you know if they laugh or not. You eventually get a feeling for adult humor. But if you're hanging out with your kids, you sort of learn like, oh, you end up with a 10-year-old sense of humor. And then if you start writing that way, I'm speaking hypothetically, I'm not ragging on a particular author, except maybe I am, if you know what I mean. And I think that's part of the problem.
Out before we get in trouble on the internet, Dave.
I know.
Yeah. Joe hates Brandon. I actually love Brandon Sanderson's. I talk about his writing lectures all the time. I think he's fantastic, but maybe not funny. When should you have just breaking a song? When shouldn't you?
I agree. Like make musical. Like I feel like book 3, Zhao, might need to be a musical.
There's a lot of good Bollywood stuff you could copy. If you want to learn how to insert dance and music numbers into your storyline, I highly recommend watch anything with Shah Rukh Khan in it. You're gonna really learn some things.
I think SNL is often not funny anymore, but I have seen the clip with like they did a, what's it called? The Roman movie.
Gladiator?
Gladiator 2, the musical. Yeah.
Roman movie.
The Roman movie.
Just like, completely, my mind went blank.
God. Right. Get yourself up to
like
for Alzheimer's check there, Dave.
Gladiator. Like, And like, maybe you need someone to just break into song in the middle of your dark epic fantasy.
Just people will skip the song. Just be aware.
I mean, no one skips the songs in Tolkien. What are you talking about?
Oh, I do.
If the whole book is a song, no one's going to skip it. Actually, no one's going to read it. So
No one's going to read it.
no one's going to read it.
No one read this book and skipped the song.
The Greatcoats are a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. Like Sebastian de Castell, his writing, where like the things that are happening are very serious and sad and depressing, but the characters have this just wonderful wit about them. And I mean, I love Loch Lamora and The Gentleman Bastards, where it's kind of the same thing of like terrible situations, funny characters. I think that is my genre. Bad situations, snarky characters. I eat it up. I will read any book with bad situations and snarky characters. Apparently Ariana has a version of that called The Great Goats now, which okay.
If you just to kind of pick up on that, if you watch any interviews with these authors, like you mentioned Loch Lamore, if you watch like Scott Lynch talking about dialogue and stuff, all these funny authors, they all have so many cultural references, and they obviously think about humor. They watch humor, and if you see interviews with any of this, your favorite stand-up comedian, like the best stand-up comedians out there, when you listen to them on podcasts or whatever, they analytically analyze jokes, analyze people's the way they say jokes, all the kind of humor. They treat it forensically, and I think it's similar with the funniest authors. They think about jokes. They think about the art of jokes. They watch their stand-up comedians. They watch the TV shows. They think about script writers who are funny, and I think if you want to be funny, that's kind of how you have to think about humor. You have to have this whole cultural kind of zeitgeist feel about it and be thinking about jokes and how to write jokes. And if all that sounds, if you listen to that thinking like, oh God, that sounds a bit hard work, then maybe you're just not meant to write very funny books, and that's okay.
You'll just never be funny.
You got to study. I think you do have to study.
Because it can ruin your entire enjoyment of comedy if you write it, because you have to keep thinking about that. You're always analyzing a joke or thinking, oh wow, that guy was so funny, why can't I be that funny? So yeah, if you're not careful, you can end up actually hating it. So you need to just kind of be very, very cautious with how you handle that very, very gentle exploding bomb of writing comedy. Yeah.
So Ariana asks, at what point are you overthinking the humor?
I don't think you can. I think the funniest people I know, the funniest stand-up comedians I know, constantly think about the humor and the art of the joke. I don't think you can overthink it. If you're funny, if you're naturally funny and this is your thing, you can't overthink it. People who just aren't funny, they will overthink it and it will come out bad. But if you're into it and you're enjoying it and you think you might be funny, I don't think you can overthink it. But I don't know. People can disagree.
Like, Ed's taking shots at people. I don't know who they are. Like, some people just aren't funny. I'm not naming names.
He's looking at me the entire time.
He's like staring at all of us. It's a camera.
We all have family members who just aren't funny, and that's fine. But like, you're allowed to say that. I think as long as they're not in a room, you're allowed to say that.
What I find fun is watching stand-up. I watch a lot of stand-up comedy. I don't watch like a whole show, but I'll watch like those 3-minute clips that end up on Facebook somehow. I love doing that, and then I love watching people who get away with stuff, because that's really interesting to me. Is when someone says something that shouldn't work, but then it does. And I'm going to name a name. I don't know if other people appreciate it, but this guy named Gary Owens, who's a white dude who's most of his humor is about black people, and it's not offensive and it's bizarre. And you watch it, he's mostly black audiences, right? So as a white guy, mostly black audience, they think he's hilarious. He's very popular in the black community, but he's a white guy telling jokes about the black community, and people love him. And how did you get away with that? And if you can figure out, and that you don't have to figure out that example, but if you can look at these guys or girls, right, and you can, why is this funny? Why is it not? Whatever, you can learn stuff, and then you can apply it in theory.
Do any of you write characters who think they are funny but aren't? I feel like Lorraine is calling me out here. because there are some people who have the incorrect opinion that my character Corden is not that funny, but he's just annoying.
Annoying is its own kind of humor. Oh, annoying characters are fun. I love writing annoying characters.
Are they watching right now? Because you're wrong.
I think when I write Spricket, I always write him as a kind of character who, when he's trying to be funny, he's not funny, but when he's not trying to be funny, he's hilarious. So like when he's getting mad at something or mad about something, that's when it's funny. When he's trying to like intentionally be quippy or witty, no one gives him anything. I think there's that element to it as well.
Let's see. There was another question up here, and I don't know. I think we missed it somewhere. But there's a thin line between building fans and getting punched in the face. Ariana says. Also, Ed, you were supposed to call out who it is you're talking about.
Who? When was this? What?
You keep saying there's some authors, blah blah blah.
No. Honestly, I don't have any authors in mind when I say that. I'm just hypothetical.
No drama-free panel, please.
I'm gonna get I'm gonna corner you. I'm gonna be like, you have to tell me who you meant.
I'm not on Twitter anymore. I don't do drama. I'm blue sky, no drama. I'm retired from drama.
Oh yeah.
None of you guys. You guys are hilarious.
Thank you. Thanks for the validation, Ed.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Another question I had. Well, this I can't remember if we already talked about it or not, but the question I had written down was, Joe, you hate comedy. Why?
I don't hate comedy. I like it, and it can be done well, but generally speaking, it's not my favorite thing. Like I read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I enjoyed it, but I never wanted to reread it because I like it when the storyline is serious. I like to laugh a little bit, but I don't like it when that's the only thing I'm getting. And the more I'm also very persnickety about like world building and like consistency, and the real comedies tend to be loosey goosey with that stuff, because that's what that is. So that's a personal taste thing. It's not me saying it's wrong or bad, but it's not my favorite thing. But then again, I'm also thinking about like there are comedies I've enjoyed. Like I just read Orconomics, which I loved, and I don't know if you guys have read Orconomics, but I met the author of Orconomics, and I'm blanking on his name. And I hung out with Zachary Pike.
Something.
And he is one of the funniest people I've ever met in person. And really, really like quiet, but super funny. Because we hung out for like 3 days at Dragon Con for a lot of hours. And he's hilarious. So I was like, I gotta read his book. Yeah, and it was excellent. Highly recommend it. But also it has kind of a comedic, like the world building is sort of silly, right? Like the premise is sort of silly, and I generally don't love that. Like a lot of depends on. I guess it can be done better or worse, but like a lot of like sitcoms annoy. What about Pratchett? I haven't gotten into Pratchett. Probably the same reason.
Well, no, Pratchett. I think some of his books there's actually quite a lot of the stakes and there's tension. Like in his guards novels, there's a murder to solve, there's a baddie to catch. So while the world is on the whole silly, and you've got like one of the guards is called Detritus. He's a troll, and they don't want him to salute because every time he salutes, he like smashes all the rocks off his head, and that's a silly gag. But then in that same book, you'll get like an amazing bit of like deep satire about like the nature of rule and law and government, and so I think it's about like, I think the beauty of humor is that it's always used to like analyze and criticize the way society functions. It can be used as an allegory for like how absurd us humans are with our big serious institutions. So I do think that while Pratchett is known to be silly and zany, absurd humor, it's not without its like deep characters and its tangible plots.
Oh, I want to jump on that just to basically say 100% what Sean just said, because I think Pratchett's one of the most misunderstood authors by people who've never read the Discworld books, or people who might have started the first couple and been like, these are a bit rubbish, what was everyone talking about? Because without doing a TED talk on Pratchett, which I can do, its first two books are basically a parody of a fantasy world, right? Color of Magic and Light Fantastic. So, you know, it's kind of making fun of classic fantasy novels. It's just a sort of gentle, fun parody. And then by the time he gets to what's called the Guards books, where he's doing, you know, this sort of the journeys of the guard of the city watch of this capital city, it's all about politics, and his writing just gets better. He's also an example of an author who visibly gets better, really better. So at the start, he's okay first book, and then by the end, I'd say he's one of the greatest authors of the 20th, early 21st century. And when you're 20-25 books into Discworld, you've got a book like Night Watch, which is one of the best books ever written, and it's not a comedy. It's not a comedy. It's a drama or thriller, whatever you want to call it, fantasy, obviously, but it's still funny. Like, it's still funny than most fantasies, but it's a serious book with serious satire. It's no longer parody; it's satire, and the comedy is second place to the themes. So I can't remember what the point of this was. I've just gone into my TED talk on Pratchett, but yeah. So Pratchett's not funny in his later books, I would say, if that makes sense.
I've read a few Pratchett's. It's kind of, I've read some of those early ones that I was kind of like, meh. I've read a few others that I thought were better.
That's my point. That's exactly my point. People read the early ones and they go, meh, and I get it. Like the first two are meh, and then it starts to get a bit better. But honestly, I would skip the early ones. There's different kinds of Discworld books. There's like the witches theme. There's subtopics basically. There's the death ones. There's the wizard writer ones, and then there's the city guard ones. Honestly, start with city guard ones. Read them in order. Because the first one is like 7 books in, and then there's about like 10 of them or whatever. That's so honestly, Dave, that's so good. I'm going to stop now because I'm just ranting.
Or if you want a standalone, read Small Gods, because it's one of the best books ever just written about organized religion. It's hilarious, and it's just very, very true to what we see with religion. So yeah.
All right, Alex asks, what's your favorite comedic character? None of y'all's.
Mr. Bean. I'm the only one.
Mark Corrigan from Peep Show.
Okay, I'm gonna go a little bit off. I think you guys have both done British comedians here, right? I don't think I've ever seen Peep Show.
It's one of the greatest sitcoms ever made. But anyway, go on.
I'm gonna say 2 people because the 2 of them need to play off each other for the humor. Sean and Gus from Psych.
Oh yeah.
If you haven't watched Psych, it is my favorite TV show. Sean is he's incredibly charismatic and great at convincing people of things. And he's super observant, so he pretends to be a psychic. And Gus is his friend, who's like the put upon friend, who's constantly like, no, Sean, we're not going to do that. And Sean convinces him to do it anyway through his charisma. And Sean and Gus together are just the absolute. I love it. Psych is one of my favorite shows. That for me those are my funniest characters. No one asked you, Ariana. I don't remember. I haven't watched it in the last few years, but I loved Psych.
For me, it's Malcolm Tucker from a British TV show called The Thick of It.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, perfect answer.
2 Americans probably won't know it. Basically, Thick of It is a political satire about British politics. It was like a 3-series show on the BBC that ran a few years ago. And he's basically he was based on a guy called Alistair Campbell, who was Tony Blair's PR chief, head of communications. But he's like a extreme version. So he just walks around basically like trying to control all these idiot government ministers, and he's just like swearing at them. He's just horrible. He's just like, can I swear live?
I've sworn
He's
those.
like, you fucking idiot, like, but like saying really funny things, like the funniest insults you can think of. He's just walking around constantly saying it to them. It's one of the funniest written shows ever. I just think about his lines all the time. He's just
And we've got Ariana says, what's another aspect to consider? How does humor age?
Depends. Really depends what you're doing. Are you writing a spoof of a film or a book that came out 2 years ago, or are you writing a political satire? I think trying to distance your humor, whether it's through a film or a book or TV show, from a moment in time or anything in real life, is the best way to ensure that it never like loses its spark. So
another big thing would just be like if the humor is at the expense of like groups of people or social like mores of a time, and so like something that perfectly fine to like make fun of a group of people in the 1980s, watching that in 2025 and you're like, oh, this is okay, they did that.
Yeah, watch an Andrew Dice Clay special. Okay, like the shock comics from the 80s. Watch it, and I think you'll find it very cringe. And I laughed at those when they came out. I will admit. Okay, sorry. If you know
the amount of like you look at those classic 90s sitcoms like Friends or Seinfeld, like the amount of like gay panic / trans panic jokes in them, like, you know, the punchline is the guy is gay or the punchline is the person is trans, and that's just the joke. I think a lot of that has aged quite poorly.
Yeah.
If you watch Friends, like there's quite a lot of like just laughing at gay guys in Friends, and like you watch that now and you're like, oh, what? That's in Friends?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but that's late 90s for you.
I loved How I Met Your Mother, and I feel like there's probably a lot of stuff in there now that would be like, don't know if it would quite hit in 2025. I don't remember those moments from Psych, Ariana, but maybe I just pushed them aside.
But then you get certain shows, or like for example, like it's always Sunny in Philadelphia, which the entire point of that show is that it's meant to be like the worst people in the world doing the worst things possible. So when they're being horrible and bigoted in episode 2005, it doesn't age as poorly because those characters are meant to be awful sacks of shite. Whereas the Friends characters like Chandler and Ross and Monica, they're meant to be like good people. So I think attaching blue humor to horrible characters, I think, is one way to intro it. It also doesn't age terribly.
I like that.
So SRRQE asks, is there a way of being nice while also being witty in writing?
Pick the right stand-up comic. Like watch, you know, some of them are not nice and some are, right? Like some they're stand-up comics whose whole thing is they're not offensive, and you can do it, right? You just have to I'm trying to think of the guy. There are examples that I can't name, but they're out there. Nate something.
Oh, Nate Bargatze?
Nate, but yeah,
Bargatze, the Tennessee guy who kind of does a gentle sort of.
Yeah, I think he's really funny, but he's also like he's not offending anyone. Like you can't argue, and you may not think he's that. I think he's really, you know, you can disagree that he's particularly funny, but there are guys like that who are trying to hit those notes.
Yeah,
that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Watch more television. That's my advice for writers. You should not have
not all humor needs to be at the expense of another person. You know, you can be witty about, I don't know, the weather. It doesn't have to be about a person. So I think that's easy.
I quite like deadpan characters who are often just nice characters who are reporting on crazy things happening in a deadpan way. Like I always like to have at least one of those characters in any book I write. So, you know, the kind of character who we'll just be seeing all this carnage or someone getting murdered, and they'll be say, oh, that that okay, that's happened, that's great, or someone will be like, oh, I've just made a massive mess, and it's like, well, yeah, I can see that, and like they're not being nasty to the person they're talking to, they're just kind of commenting on what's happening. Those kind of just witty deadpan characters. They're nice people, but they're just like everything's daft, everything's stupid. Quite like those guys.
I think for me, like my characters are mean to each other, but a lot of times that's like because that's how I am to my friends. I am snarky and kind of like when I like somebody, I'm kind of like a little bit of a snarky jerk in like a nice way. And so like my characters, Jen and Corden, will be like going back and forth with each other, and they're friends and like not being mean really. But I know some people will be like, the humor's, there's a lot of mean humor. And I'm like, I mean, that's just, it's banter and back and forth between people who are friends. They're not actually mean.
Making fun of your friend is not the same as like making fun of like Jews, right? Like there's a different vibe to those two kinds of jokes, right? Like making fun of your friend who presumably can take it and knows you don't really mean it is not cruel the same way like just making fun of like a class of people could be.
Yeah.
I just pick Jews because I'm Jewish, so I'm allowed to.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So aside from jokes purely at a group's expense, what, in your opinion, is a low-hanging fruit, jokes, or poor humor?
Fart jokes. Just don't do them, man. Don't do them. I don't find them funny. I don't find them funny in any context at all. Don't like fart jokes.
I mean, I'm trying to
What
think
do you think
if I
of
can remember a funny
the
fart
program
joke.
Slow Horses? Then, have you seen Slow Horses on Apple, Sean?
Yeah, I don't find any of that funny.
Is Gary Oldman as the main spy guy? This whole thing is that he's just going around farting, and all
He
the
just
other
farts
spies
all-
are like,
yeah,
"What are you doing?" But
no.
he's Gary Oldman, so I think he gets away with it.
Gets away with it. I mean, but the character is more than just a farting man. He has depth. He has a history.
More than just
he's
a
one of the
farting
best spies
man.
in the country.
That should be the title of a book.
More than just a farting man.
More than just a farting man. He's a farting man, but he's more than just a farting man.
The new American classic. Yeah.
Starring Gary Oldman. Yeah, self-deprecating humor is a good one. I do a lot of that.
I think maybe sort of like the more they're talking about low-hanging poor humor, like the more stereotypical, like not talking about a group's expense, but just the more kind of stereotypical the situation. A bit like Sean's point about fart jokes, like unless you do it really well, a fart joke is rubbish because it's just like the thing that everyone laughs at, whether or not someone's funny. So I like to think if someone I knew who isn't funny would be making that joke or laughing at that, try to avoid saying that. So like, if the king's dying, and then some jester comes in, and then you're like, oh, look at the funny jester. I'm not really doing this very well. But you know what I mean? If it reads like, oh, my friend who's not funny has just come in and made this joke, then try and avoid that.
I don't think low-hanging fruit is based on the topic. The low-hanging fruit is the joke too obvious? Right? So the fart joke is just like, oh, and then like someone just, like the king's dying, jester comes in, sits on a whoopee cushion, and makes a farting sound. That's too obvious. That's too easy. But you can still make a clever fart. I can't think of a clever fart joke for that situation off the top of my head. But you can make a clever fart joke. It can be okay. I remember because I have at least 2 dick jokes, I think, in Wistful Ascending. And I remember it was going on Discord, and someone was like, "Oh, I would never read a book with dick jokes." And I'm like, "You haven't read it. They might be funny. I'm not. Maybe they are, right?" And I think one of them actually, people have usually told me that it is quite funny. So I'm like, you can't tell the obvious one, right? You can't just like you just have a video of a guy standing in the park and a kid throws a ball and it hits him in the crotch and he falls to the ground. Like you can't do that too many times. It might be funny the first time, but after like I've seen this before. So if your audience is already saying the joke in their head and then you say the joke, it's not as good. That's low hanging fruit. So I don't think it goes by the topic.
A lot of slapstick humor, like what you're talking about there, that like if you watch an old slapstick silent film from the 20s or 30s or old slapstick comedies from that time period, like it was kind of a new thing on film at that point and people loved it. But now, like, if you're watching a movie now where people are just like getting hit in the balls over and over again, and like, or there's all sorts of different like constant physical humor, it's just kind of like, we've seen this so many times. It's not really funny. It's overdone. And I think in books, if you're trying to do too much of that slapstick kind of humor, it doesn't really work as well just because it's been done so much. I know, Joe, I know how you feel about Marvel. But I would say, like, I like the Marvel movies. I think they're fun. They definitely have the low-hanging fruit humor in them sometimes, where it's like they make the quippy one-liner after like blowing up a building and walking away from it. And like every single time, every character makes the little quippy one-liner after the big action moment. And it starts to lose its thing. If it was like, if one or two of the characters did it, it would be funny. But they all do it, and it kind of starts to lose the
surprise
that you maybe want from it.
Yeah, it loses the surprise. If you're not surprise is part of comedy. If you're expecting
also, sorry, Joe, please continue.
No. Go ahead.
I would say also the fear there is that all your characters start to sound the same. Like, so with Marvel, they ran into a problem where you had like 6 characters that were all like different Tony Stark archetypes had to meet in the same films. Like, how do we not like just like, how do we make this work? So I think when it comes to running your characters, like, you know, try and limit your archetypes to your main characters. Like like, for example, there wouldn't be another character like Spricket but for Spricket. I wouldn't make another funny character like them, because then I just would be kind of showing my hand a bit too, showing my hand and showing, oh, I'm quite limited in what I can do. So I think you just need to be very careful.
I think that's a good point about how your character should be different. So, like in Lightfall, I have arguably 3 characters who are all the funny ones, but I tried to make them like different kinds of funny. So there's one, Jacob, who's the kind of more sort of sarcastic, like a bit of an idiot with his sarcasm, kind of just, you know, a bit of a drunkard kind of character. Then there's one, Alana, who's the more she's funny because she says weird stuff. Like, she's not always trying to be funny when she does it, but it's just stuff that normal people wouldn't say. Like, let's go down to the basement and just do some sexual stuff, whatever. And everyone's like, that was not the appropriate time to say that. And then the humor comes from that. And then there's another character who's just angry all the time, like a werewolf who's just hates everyone, is just angry all the time. But then her sarcasm comes from a place of, I kind of hate you all. So I think I literally sat down and I wrote the different kinds of comedy I wanted for these 3 characters, because I was worried, like Sean would say, I was worried it'd just be like, oh, it's just got 3 people trying to be funny in the same scene, and it's just like you all sound the same. But if you got someone in the same scene being like terrible self-esteem sarcasm, hates everyone's sarcasm, and then doesn't realize what they're saying is weird, but everyone's like, wow, that was really weird, then it stops the humor being all the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Lami's a fan of Jacob. Yeah, cheers, Lami.
Jacob's my favorite. I keep calling him James, though.
It's okay.
I definitely kind of like, do some of my characters have a similar sense of humor? Probably. I feel I tried to make them have like a different style, but I'm sure they probably say some things at different points that could be like, oh, that kind of sounds like a Corden thing, but that was from someone else this time. And it is what it is at some point. No one asked you.
I just thought you did that really well, because who's the guy who's like Corden hates and he hates Corden?
Tobias.
Yeah. So at some point he suddenly starts being funny, right? I can't remember what point, but there was a bit where like he says something really funny, and it's like a humor that I'd not seen before, and he just becomes really funny towards like halfway through the book or something. But it's not like Corden. So I'm not explaining this very well, but my point is like, it's not just like a bunch of Cordens. I thought you did that really well.
Well, Tobias is more of like, he's serious, but his is more of like he's funny, but in I feel like he's more gruff and a little bit kind of cutting, but more direct, whereas Corden's more like talk you around in a circle for 2 minutes while insulting you the whole time. And then Jen is just kind of straight to the point with a bit of snark, where's the wine type kind of situation. So I had a lot of fun with those characters. The novella I'm writing right now has a similar situation because one of the characters, Cork, who was a smaller character in Envoys, is the main character, and has a similar kind of humor to Jen. But as I've been writing it, things just keep getting worse and worse for these poor characters. And so Rach, R.A. Sandpiper, read it, and her response was, why, Dave, why? Jesus, oh, balls, etc., etc. Just like, I know you said this was dark, but Jesus, and things like that. It's like, I still think the characters are funny. I just, maybe the things happening are a little bit worse. I don't know. But it's been fun. All right. We probably are almost done. Anyone in the chat, if you have any last questions you want to throw out there, any of the three of you, if you have any points you would like to make, things you'd like to bring up, this is the time.
I think we should all remember Ed's rule. If you're not funny, don't even try.
Yeah.
Yes. Which means, Alex, if you're still in the chat, just give up.
Yeah. I'm just going to use, as my friend Ed Crocker always says, and I just tell it to people all the time now.
It's so bad. And another thing that like I shouldn't say publicly is that like I value humor like the same as like kindness and like empathy. I put it so there's people in my life where I'm like, you're really kind and I like you and you're a friend, but you're just as kind as this other friend, but I like them better because they're also really funny. And I can't believe I just said that out loud. It's like none of my like friends I see physically on a weekly basis will watch this. But that's an awful thing to say. But I just like it's such an important part of conversations. Like a conversation when no one's funny, it's just you just want to die. I don't know. Anyways, I should probably go.
I have, I guess, a final kind of statement about this is that for those of you who might be a bit reluctant to read comedy books, fantasy books, comedy fantasy books, don't conflate a book that's a comedy with a book that doesn't have a plot or characters or a stake, or a book that doesn't take itself seriously. Because I can guarantee you that people who write humor, people who write like myself, like the craft of humor and writing it, I take deadly seriously. And I'm not like, oh, this is my silly little book and all my silly little characters and silly little jokes. I'm like taking it as seriously as I would expect someone writing grimdark takes their craft seriously. Someone who writes heroic fantasy takes their craft seriously. So, give funny books a shot. You might be surprised. You might laugh. You might not laugh. Or best of all, you might be entertained. Underneath all that humor and jokes might be a really fun, poignant story that you didn't expect to find in the first place.
So I would agree, Sean. Give funny books a chance, especially give The Ballad of Spricket the Bard and Company a chance, because it is absolutely hilarious. It's right there. Normally, I would have a copy of all of your books here since I do have all of them, but they're all at my house and I'm not at my house. Ed, I did want to tell you this. I don't think I ever actually told you, sent you a picture, but I have a table at a local bookstore for their book bash in April. And I was at the bookstore a few weeks back and I looked, and in there, they have one little bookshelf of science fiction and fantasy, like one little bookshelf, maybe like 7 rows, like less than 100 books. And one of those books is Lightfall by Ed Crocker.
Oh, wow.
What would have been funny there is if you built that up and then you just said someone else's book.
No, it was yours.
Oh, it works.
You missed the
Wheel of Time.
Wind and
trying to be kind. I'm sorry. I should have been trying to be funny.
And it was the Ballad of Spricket the Bard.
That didn't happen.
No, but thank you, Dave. That's genuinely nice to hear. You know, I like those stories as all authors do.
The time I said it was 10, Lamia, because England is stupid and wrong and dumb, and we hate them.
He forgot about
Whenever the
daylight
first
saving,
time I
Lamia.
tried to do a live stream with Rob Sanders and Rach Sandpiper, I ran into this and Sean, I think you were in that as well. Maybe.
Oh God.
I tried it just like I got confused because it was like British summertime, and I had looked up GMT. And then this time I was like, okay, it's a 6-hour difference. Like, no, it's not a 6-hour difference right now.
We're in that
Why do
space
we have
where
a month? Yeah, why is there a month separate between American and British daylight saving? Why?
it's too easy otherwise.
No idea.
Because that's 1776. That's why.
Why is our daylight savings time at all? It makes no sense.
Agriculture. That's why. So farmers work until in the dark, basically. That's true. So they could be out in the day when they're harvesting.
But they can choose when they work. How could it possibly make a difference? What time it is, like number-wise. They have only so many hours of daylight. They can do what they want. Doesn't really make sense. Doesn't actually give you more daylight. It just means it's a different time. Different conversation. My job is terribly impacted by daylight savings time, so it drives me nuts every year. Because we're a global company, we send no one wants to hear this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, my day job, clearly not writing. No one cares in the books. Although keeping track of time zones when you have like people going from planet to planet, like that's another whole topic.
I'm getting destroyed in the chat right now.
Complicated timelines.
Dave is American.
Can't.
God, just stop Dave. Stop letting Dave schedule things. Dave is American. Feeling a lot
Dave,
of
half the scribes are in GMT. That's quite true, actually. We're
I had it. I knew it. I had it all set up, and then it changed. I knew it was 6 hours, and it was a sad day for me. So one last thing before we leave, I want to give all three of you a chance to show us your book. Tell us one last time. Anyone in the chat maybe who either hasn't read the book or needs that little push to get to it, give them just a little pitch. We'll start with Sean.
The Battle of the Berne Company, if you like quest fantasies with characters that don't get on quite so well at the beginning, but get on a little bit better towards the end, this is the kind of story for you. There's japes, there's quips, there's stakes, there's all sorts of shenanigans in this book. Buy today at the low price of £2.99 on Kindle.
All right. Ed.
Actually, sometimes I just forget to get my book, but today I've remembered it. Lightfall. It's an epic. Well, if you're watching this in my country, you can't get it because it's only on sale in America. Sorry. Well, no, that's not true. You can get it from Amazon.com.
Where can I get your book? Can I get your book now?
So it's you've started a really boring story now. But basically, I thought you wouldn't be able to get it in Britain unless you got it from Amazon.com with shipping charges or whatever. But Amazon.co.uk started selling it, but then they put everyone's book on hold, and it says like August. So Jeff Bezos is just fucking with me for some reason. However, you can order it from Blackwell's in England, and that's like a week or something, and Forbidden Planet randomly. I don't know why. So it's not quite true. Yeah. So yeah, there you go, Sean. Get on Blackwell's after you've.
All right, I will indeed.
I should send you a free copy actually. Anyway, this is my epic fantasy with vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers, and it's it's the first in the trilogy, and you should check it out if you like epic fantasy with vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers. Sorry, it's like 10:30. I'm really bad at selling myself.
It's a great cover, Ed.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Really
There's a
is.
crazy story about that cover, which I can't tell you live, but if we go off live after this,
If
I
we
can tell you a
die,
crazy story about
then
it.
you'll tell us.
Oh,
Yeah.
God. Save that one for the Patreon.
Behind the paywall.
There you go. There you go.
All right, and Joe.
Okay, I'm the author of The Hybrid Helix. This is book 1. It has a new cover now, so the typography is different. There's a long story behind that I can tell you. There are 6 books out, and I have one other vaguely related book. And it is, if you left Guardians of the Galaxy and you thought I need more of this in my life, this is the book series. It's about a retired weapon of mass destruction seeking redemption and coffee, and the shenanigans that inevitably ensue as, of course, if he just managed to find a decent cup of coffee and a girlfriend and nothing happened, there wouldn't be a book series. So things have to happen. And it's a series, it's a related standalones, and it's a little bit of, I don't know how to describe it, kitchen sink space opera. Kitchen sink space opera. Kaiju, we have kaiju, we've got intelligent bears with Russian accents, we've got planet-sized vampiric cephalopods, walking sharks, and lots of artificially intelligent spaceships with personalities, including the space station they live on, who's a person. So lots of weird stuff, I guess.
Okay. Sold.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, and my book is The Envoys of War, which is a snarky, witty fantasy adventure with a bunch of, I think one reviewer called them a bunch of certified hot messes, and I think that describes them pretty well. Lots of banter, lots of wit, lots of apparently mean humor, and like it's not as dark as a book like a Locke Lamora or The Great Coats, but I feel like it does have some of the same vibe in a way, but probably not quite as dark as some of those sort of books. So yeah, I think, Joe, yours is available on Kindle Unlimited and Amazon. Mine's available on Kindle Unlimited and Amazon. I sell signed copies on my website, which are a lot cheaper for people in the US because shipping's cheaper. But and then Sean, you're also on Kindle Unlimited and Amazon. And then Ed over here is a big shot and is not on Kindle Unlimited and not even on Amazon in some countries.
In America, Kindle and Amazon in America. Oh wait, am I on Kindle Unlimited? I'm
I don't
so
think
stupid.
so.
No. Okay.
Does he
Would I
even
know?
know?
I even know?
He's
Yeah,
he's up in the clouds.
$15 for an ebook on Amazon.
It's funny because it's true.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Hopefully you have trauma bonded in the chat while we have trauma bonded here talking about comedy, and go out there, read more funny books.
Yes.
Read books by some of these guys here, and just continue to be awesome. Thank you and farewell.
Goodbye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.
Take care.